Episode 40, Secure the Build Pipeline and Protect Artifacts, we focus on hardening continuous integration and artifact flows so that a quiet compromise in the pipeline cannot turn into a catastrophic event in production. Build systems have become one of the highest value targets because they sit at the point where source code turns into running software and where trust is often assumed rather than proven. When attackers land there, they can inject backdoors, modify dependencies, or divert artifacts in ways that are hard to notice after the fact. The goal in this discussion is to treat the pipeline itself as critical infrastructure, with controls, evidence, and clear responsibilities. When you do, you turn an invisible risk into a managed part of your security architecture. A natural place to start is by locking down build runners, because they execute the code that shapes every artifact you ship. Runners should have minimal network access, restricted to only the repositories, registries, and services they truly need, rather than broad outbound connectivity. Credentials available to runners must be tightly scoped and short-lived, reducing the impact if a pipeline step or dependency is compromised. Unreviewed script execution, such as arbitrary shell fragments pasted into pipeline definitions, should be discouraged or outright blocked in favor of vetted, reusable jobs. When runners operate in this constrained way, it is much harder for a single misconfiguration to become a pivot point for deeper compromise. Trust in code must be anchored before it enters the pipeline, which is where code signing, commit verification, and protected branch policies come into play. Code signing at the repository level, combined with commit verification using mechanisms such as signed commits, helps ensure that the changes you build come from authenticated authors, not forged identities. Protected branches can require reviews, status checks, and successful tests before changes are merged, which prevents unreviewed code from flowing quietly into builds. Consistent enforcement of these practices reduces the chance that a malicious or accidental change slips in without eyes on it. Over time, this creates a culture where traceability and accountability are normal parts of development. Reproducible builds add another layer of assurance by making it possible to recreate artifacts exactly from the same inputs and compare results. This requires pinning dependencies to specific versions rather than floating ranges, which reduces the risk of unexpected updates during build time. Automatically verifying checksums for downloaded components in toolchains ensures that what you retrieve matches what was intended, not a tampered variant. When artifacts can be reconstructed deterministically, you gain a powerful tool for investigating anomalies and verifying that production binaries match the audited source. This discipline turns the build process itself into an auditable, testable piece of your security story. Secrets used in the pipeline deserve special treatment, which means storing them outside the pipeline configuration and providing them as short-lived tokens with scoped permissions. Instead of embedding static keys or passwords in build definitions, use dedicated secret management systems that inject credentials only for the duration of specific jobs. These tokens should grant access only to the resources needed for that step, such as a particular registry or repository, and should expire quickly after use. This approach limits both where secrets can leak and how long a stolen token remains valuable. It also makes rotation and revocation more manageable, because you are not chasing credentials through many files and environments. Security scanning should be woven through the pipeline so that dependencies, containers, and infrastructure code are checked at each relevant stage. Early in the pipeline, dependency scanners can flag known vulnerabilities and license issues before code is even compiled. Container images built later can be examined for outdated packages, misconfigurations, or risky behaviors, while infrastructure as code templates can be scanned for unsafe defaults and policy violations. By placing these checks at multiple points, You create a layered view of risk that evolves as artifacts become more concrete. This ensures that problems are caught as close as possible to their source rather than after deployment. Certain pipeline steps carry more risk than others, and they should require explicit approvals and stronger controls. For example, configuration changes to production-facing deployment jobs, security-critical parameter updates, or modifications to cryptographic policies should be subject to 4 eyes review, where at least 2 people must approve. Emergency break glass mechanisms, used when urgent fixes are required, must be clearly documented, logged, and monitored, with post-incident review to confirm they were used appropriately. These approval structures prevent a single engineer or compromised account from unilaterally introducing high-impact changes. They also reinforce a culture where careful scrutiny is expected around sensitive actions. Provenance and transparency are strengthened when the pipeline generates software bills of materials, often called SBOMs, and cryptographic attestations for each artifact. An SBOM lists the components and versions included in a build, providing a quick reference when new vulnerabilities are disclosed. Attestations, signed by trusted keys controlled by the build system, can record details such as which pipeline ran, which commit was built, and which checks passed. Publishing this provenance for consumers inside your organization, and sometimes for external partners, allows them to verify they are running authentic, known builds. Over time, this traceability becomes an essential element of your supply chain assurance story. Artifact repositories deserve the same level of protection as source code because they hold what ultimately runs in your environments. Tamper-evident storage mechanisms, such as append-only logs or integrity checking systems, can signal if artifacts are altered after publication. Access controls should enforce least privilege, granting read or write permissions only where truly necessary, and separating administrative actions from everyday usage. Retention and cleanup policies must be defined so old artifacts are not left unmanaged in ways that complicate vulnerability response. Securing these repositories ensures that once artifacts are built and signed, they remain trustworthy until they are intentionally retired. The final step before code runs is deployment, and this is where artifact verification must become non-negotiable. Deployment systems should verify signatures on artifacts, confirm that they match expected provenance records, and enforce policy checks such as SBOM rules before admitting them into environments. If an artifact fails verification, the deployment should stop, and alerts should be raised so the issue can be investigated immediately. These admission controls close the loop, ensuring that even if something goes wrong earlier in the chain, unverified builds do not quietly reach production. This enforcement turns provenance from a passive record into an active gate. Isolation of environments is another cornerstone, separating build, test, and production networks and credentials so that a compromise in one area does not automatically spill into others. Build systems should not have direct access to production secrets or control planes. Instead, they should interact through narrowly defined, audited interfaces when necessary. Test environments can reuse some configurations, but should avoid sharing persistent credentials or data sets that would create cross-contamination risks. This segmentation reduces the blast radius of any breach and helps you reason about which assets are at risk when an incident occurs. It also simplifies regulatory arguments about where sensitive information is stored and processed. All of these controls are more effective when supported by pipeline telemetry that records behavior and highlights anomalies. Telemetry should capture which jobs run, what artifacts they produce, which signatures are applied, and where verification passes or fails. Alerting rules can watch for unsigned artifacts, skipped checks, unusual configuration changes, or deviations from normal timing and volume patterns. Drift detection can highlight differences between expected and actual pipeline definitions or environments, prompting investigation before attackers can exploit them. With good telemetry, you move from hoping the pipeline is safe to actively observing its security posture. If you summarize the key ideas, securing the build pipeline and protecting artifacts follows a consistent pattern. You harden runners and access paths, enforce signing and commit verification, and strive for reproducible builds with pinned dependencies. You move secrets into dedicated stores, insert scanning at multiple stages, and require approvals for sensitive steps. You generate SBOMs and attestations, secure artifact repositories, verify artifacts at deployment, and isolate environments to constrain breaches. You then use telemetry to watch for anomalies and drift, making the pipeline a monitored, controlled system rather than a black box. This pattern connects each technical choice to an overall narrative of trustworthy software delivery. To close on a practical note, identify one gap in your current build pipeline where trust is still assumed rather than verified, and focus on closing it. A common starting point is enabling signature verification for artifacts at deployment, ensuring that only builds signed by your trusted pipeline can reach staging or production. As you implement this, you will naturally discover questions about key management, SBOM generation, and telemetry that point to further improvements. By tightening this single link in the chain, you create a concrete example of pipeline hardening that others can follow, gradually turning your build system into a resilient, evidence-backed part of your security program. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.